Admiral Sarah Chen stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of Jefferson High School. The face looking back at her seemed impossibly young for someone who had commanded 3-star fleets across the galaxy. At 15, she had the same brown eyes and black hair she'd had at 8 when she first stepped onto the bridge of the UES Prometheus. The only difference now was the acne on her chin and the nervous expression she couldn't quite hide. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Sarah took a deep breath and gathered her books. Today marked her 3rd week at Jefferson High, and she still felt like an alien trying to blend in with the human population. Which was ironic, considering she'd successfully negotiated peace treaties with actual aliens. Walking down the hallway, Sarah observed her classmates with the same analytical mind that had once studied enemy fleet formations. Groups clustered around lockers, their conversations a mix of gossip, complaints about homework, and discussions about weekend plans. She recognized the social hierarchies immediately: the popular kids who commanded attention, the athletes who moved with confident swagger, the quiet students who kept to themselves. Sarah belonged to none of these groups. How could she explain that while her classmates were learning to ride bicycles, she was learning to pilot warships through asteroid fields? While they played with toys, she was making decisions that affected the lives of millions across 3-star systems. "Hey, Sarah," a voice called out behind her. She turned to see Marcus Rodriguez jogging to catch up. Marcus sat behind her in advanced physics, one of the few classes where Sarah felt somewhat comfortable. At least the laws of physics made sense, unlike the unwritten rules of teenage social interaction. "Did you finish the assignment on quantum mechanics?" Marcus asked, slightly out of breath. Sarah nodded. She had completed it in 20 minutes, drawing on her experience with faster-than-light drives. "It wasn't too difficult," she said quietly. Marcus laughed. "Not too difficult? That assignment had me up until midnight." "You make it look easy." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had learned to downplay her abilities, but sometimes her knowledge slipped through. During her first week, she had accidentally corrected their history teacher about the details of the First Contact War, claiming she had read about it in advanced texts. The teacher had been impressed but suspicious. "I just read a lot," Sarah mumbled. They walked together toward their next class. Sarah found herself stealing glances at Marcus. He was tall for 15, with an easy smile and curly brown hair that always looked perfectly messy. Unlike the admirals and generals she used to brief, Marcus made her nervous in a completely different way. Her palms grew sweaty, and she found herself forgetting words mid-sentence when he looked directly at her. "You know," Marcus said as they reached the classroom door, "a bunch of us are going to see that new space movie this weekend. The one with all the CGI battles. You should come with us." Sarah's heart jumped. A movie about space battles, something she knew intimately, with a group of teenagers she barely knew. The thought terrified her more than facing down a Korthak battlecruiser ever had. I might be busy," she stammered. Marcus's face fell slightly. "Oh, okay. Well, if you change your mind, just let me know." As he disappeared into the classroom, Sarah cursed herself. She had commanded respect from hardened military veterans, negotiated with species that communicated through color changes, and made split-second decisions in the heat of battle. So why couldn't she manage a simple conversation with a boy her own age? The afternoon classes passed in a blur. Sarah sat through English literature, pretending to analyze themes in Romeo and Juliet, while her mind wandered to the encrypted messages hidden in her bedroom. The Galactic Council still consulted her on major decisions, sending updates through quantum-encrypted channels. Just last week, she had helped resolve a border dispute between the Terran Federation and the Zephyrian Alliance from her desk while working on algebra homework. During chemistry class, Sarah watched her lab partner, Emma Torres, mix solutions with casual confidence. Emma was everything Sarah wished she could be: popular, funny, and completely at ease with herself. She had been trying to befriend Sarah since the first day, but Sarah found herself pulling back whenever Emma got too close to personal topics. "So what did you do before you moved here?" Emma asked as they waited for their experiment to heat up. Sarah's standard answer rolled off her tongue. "My family moved around a lot for my dad's work." Military stuff, it wasn't entirely a lie. The truth was far more complicated. Sarah's father had been a civilian contractor who died in a transport accident when she was 6. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, was a xenobiologist who had been studying alien life forms when the first attacks came. When humanity needed leaders who understood both military strategy and alien psychology, 8-year-old Sarah had somehow emerged as a natural choice. Her young mind could process the complex patterns of multi-species warfare in ways that adult brains, locked into human thinking patterns, simply couldn't. Must have been tough, moving so much, Emma said sympathetically. Sarah nodded, though tough didn't begin to describe it. She remembered sleepless nights in the command center of the flagship Vengeance, weighing tactical options while her advisors looked to her for guidance. She remembered the weight of responsibility when Admiral Harrison told her that humanity's survival depended on her decisions. She remembered the loneliness of being the only person in the fleet who still needed help tying her shoes. The final bell rang, releasing students into the afternoon sunshine. Sarah gathered her books and headed for the exit, lost in thought. She had saved humanity from extinction, united species that had been enemies for centuries, and established trade routes that brought prosperity to dozens of worlds. Her tactical innovations were studied in military academies across the galaxy, but she couldn't work up the courage to go to a movie with classmates. As she walked home, Sarah's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. The Andromedan ambassador wanted her input on mining rights in the neutral zone. She would spend her evening analyzing treaty documents and drafting recommendations that could prevent another interstellar war. Tomorrow, she would sit in high school biology class, dissecting frogs and pretending she didn't know the cellular structure of 17 different alien species. She would eat lunch alone, watching her classmates navigate social situations that seemed more complex than any space battle she had ever fought. Sarah Chen had conquered the stars before she could legally drive a car. Now, at 15, her greatest challenge wasn't enemy fleets or diplomatic crises. It was figuring out how to be a normal teenager when she had never been allowed to be a normal child. The Andromedan crisis briefing came through at 2:47 a.m., jolting Sarah awake from dreams of space battles in high school hallways. She grabbed her secure tablet from under her mattress, squinting at the blue glow of the quantum-encrypted message. 3 mining colonies had gone dark in the Kepler sector, and long-range sensors detected unknown ship signatures. Sarah rubbed her eyes and began analyzing the tactical data. The attack patterns looked familiar, too familiar. The precise strikes on communication arrays, the surgical targeting of defensive installations, the way the attackers had avoided civilian areas. This bore all the hallmarks of human military doctrine, specifically strategies she had developed during the Korthak War. Her fingers flew across the tablet, cross-referencing the attack vectors with classified databases only she had access to. The conclusion made her stomach turn. Someone was using her own tactical innovations against allied colonies. But who had access to those classified strategies? And more importantly, why target Andromedan mining operations? By 4 a.m., Sarah had drafted a preliminary analysis and transmitted it through secure channels to Admiral Harrison, now Director of Galactic Defense. She managed 2 hours of sleep before her alarm clock dragged her back to the mundane reality of teenage life. Standing in the shower, Sarah tried to wash away the exhaustion and focus on her immediate problem: the group project in world history. Mrs. Patterson had assigned teams to research different aspects of global conflicts, and Sarah found herself grouped with Marcus, Emma, and a quiet boy named Tyler who always wore headphones. The irony wasn't lost on her. While she secretly advised world leaders on preventing the next galactic war, she had to pretend to research the causes of World War II from textbooks that got half the details wrong. At breakfast, her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, noticed the dark circles under Sarah's eyes. "Another late-night consulting session?" she asked quietly, glancing around their modest kitchen. Sarah nodded, spreading peanut butter on toast with mechanical precision. Her mother was one of the few people who knew the truth about Sarah's role in galactic affairs, though even she didn't know all the details. The weight of secrecy sometimes felt heavier than the weight of command ever had. "Maybe it's time to step back," her mother suggested gently. "You're 15, Sarah, you've done enough. Let the adults handle things for a while." Sarah looked up from her toast. "The adults are the ones who nearly got humanity wiped out before they asked an 8-year-old for help. They still make the same mistakes, Mom. They think in straight lines, while the galaxy operates in 3-dimensional chess." The familiar argument died on her lips as she saw the pain in her mother's eyes. Dr. Chen had sacrificed her own promising career in xenobiology to support Sarah's impossible burden. They both knew Sarah couldn't simply walk away. Too many lives depended on her unique perspective. At school, Sarah met her project group in the library during lunch period. Marcus had chosen their topic: the role of unconventional leadership in crisis situations. Sarah nearly choked on her sandwich when Emma read the assignment aloud. "I think we should focus on young leaders who changed history," Emma said excitedly. "Like Joan of Arc or Alexander the Great. People who took charge when traditional authority figures failed." Tyler looked up from his notebook for the first time. "What about more recent examples? Like, what if there were young people making important decisions today but we just didn't know about it?" Sarah felt blood rushing to her face. That's pretty unlikely," she stammered. "Important decisions require experience and training." Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. Sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what's needed. Look at tech companies. Some of the biggest breakthroughs come from teenagers who think outside the box. But military strategy and diplomacy are different," Sarah argued, then realized she was being too specific. "I mean, hypothetically, those fields require understanding complex political situations and—" She trailed off as her three teammates stared at her with curious expressions. "You know a lot about military stuff," Emma observed. "Did your dad really work in the military?" Sarah's throat felt dry. "He was a contractor. I picked up some things." The lie tasted bitter. Her father had been a gentleman who fixed environmental systems on transport ships. He would have been horrified to know his daughter spent her nights planning defensive strategies against hostile alien forces. They worked on the project for the rest of lunch period, with Sarah carefully contributing just enough to be helpful, without revealing the depth of her knowledge. She found herself enjoying the collaborative process, something she rarely experienced in her real work. When Admiral Harrison needed her input, it came as orders disguised as requests. When the Galactic Council sought her advice, it was delivered through formal diplomatic channels. Here in the library, she could bounce ideas off Marcus, who had an intuitive understanding of human psychology that sometimes surprised her. Emma brought creative solutions that reminded Sarah not every problem required military precision. Even Tyler, quiet as he was, occasionally offered insights that cut straight to the heart of complex issues. For a brief moment, Sarah forgot about encrypted messages and alien ambassadors. She was just a teenager working on a school project with friends who appreciated her contributions. Without knowing, they came from someone who had reshaped galactic politics before she learned algebra. The moment shattered when her phone buzzed with an emergency signal. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom and opened the message. The Andromedan colonies weren't just under attack, they were being systematically conquered. Whoever was using her strategies had escalated from hit-and-run raids to full occupation. Worse, the attackers were broadcasting on open channels, claiming to act in humanity's name. They accused the Andromedans of treaty violations and declared the mining rights forfeit to human interests. Sarah recognized the legal language. It was pulled directly from precedents she had established during the Rigel Accords. Someone wasn't just using her military tactics. They were using her diplomatic framework to justify aggressive expansion. Every innovation she had created to protect humanity was being twisted into a weapon of conquest. Her hand shook as she typed a response to Admiral Harrison. This required immediate intervention, but it also required delicacy. If she responded too forcefully, it might validate the attackers' claims about human aggression. If she responded too weakly, other species might see it as a sign that humanity's protection wasn't worth maintaining their alliances. The bathroom door opened, and Emma's voice called out, "Sarah, are you okay? You've been in there for 10 minutes. Sarah quickly closed her tablet and flushed the toilet for effect. "Just feeling a little sick," she called back, which wasn't entirely untrue. When she emerged, Emma was waiting with a concerned expression. "You look really pale. Maybe you should go to the nurse." Sarah shook her head. "I'll be fine. Just stress about the project, I think." It was another lie in an endless chain of deception. Sarah was stressed, but not about their world history assignment. She was stressed about preventing a galactic war while maintaining her cover as a normal high school student. As they walked back to the library, Emma chatted about weekend plans and upcoming tests. Sarah tried to respond appropriately, but part of her mind was already drafting counter strategies for the Andromedan situation. She needed to find a way to neutralize the attackers without revealing her involvement, protect civilian populations without appearing to favor alien interests over human ones, and maintain the delicate balance of power that kept 36 species from each other's throats, all while finishing a book report on The Great Gatsby and pretending she didn't know that the real Great Gatsby was the fragile piece she had built between the stars. Sarah's carefully constructed double life began cracking during fourth period chemistry, when Principal Matthews called her to the office over the intercom. Every head in the classroom turned to stare at her, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. In her previous life, commanding starfleets being summoned meant urgent tactical briefings or diplomatic crises. In high school, it usually meant trouble. "Miss Chen to the principal's office immediately," came the announcement again. Emma gave her a sympathetic look as Sarah gathered her books. "What do you think you did?" she whispered. Sarah shook her head, genuinely puzzled. She had been careful to maintain average grades, stay out of conflicts, and avoid drawing attention to herself. Her biggest worry was that someone had noticed her unusual behavior. During the group project discussions, the walk to the principal's office felt longer than the corridor, leading to the war room aboard the UES Vengeance. At least there she knew what to expect. Here she was operating blind in unfamiliar territory. Principal Matthews was waiting with two other adults Sarah didn't recognize. One was a woman in a dark suit who screamed federal agent, and the other was a man in military dress uniform with enough ribbons to suggest serious credentials. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized him, Colonel James Weber, one of Admiral Harrison's most trusted officers. "Please sit down, Sarah," Principal Matthews said, his usually jovial demeanor replaced by nervous formality. Sarah remained standing, her mind racing through possibilities. Had her cover been blown? Were they here to extract her? Or worse, had someone connected her to the Andromedan attacks? The woman in the suit spoke first. "Sarah, I'm Agent Karen Mills with Homeland Security. This is Colonel Weber. We need to discuss some unusual activity we've detected." "I'm not sure what you mean," Sarah said carefully, falling back on the innocent teenager act that had served her well in delicate negotiations. Colonel Weber leaned forward. "Sarah, we know about your consulting work. We know about the quantum encrypted communications. What we don't know is how a 15-year-old girl got access to classified tactical databases and why she's been sharing information with foreign governments." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. They knew about the communications, but not about her role. That meant her identity was still partially protected, but she was walking a tightrope over an abyss. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, maintaining eye contact with the same steadiness she had once used to stare down Korthak warlords. Agent Mills opened a tablet and showed Sarah intercept logs. "These communications originated from your home address. The encryption is military grade, and the content involves strategic recommendations for ongoing conflicts in space-based territories." Principal Matthews looked bewildered. "Space-based territories? What are you talking about?" Sarah realized with growing horror that her principal, and likely most of Earth's civilian population, still didn't know the full extent of humanity's interstellar involvement. The carefully maintained fiction that Earth was just beginning to explore space was crumbling in real time. Colonel Weber must have reached the same conclusion because he shot Agent Mills a warning look. "The details are classified, Mr. Matthews. What matters is that we've identified security concerns involving one of your students." "Now wait just a minute," came a familiar voice from the doorway. "Dr. Lisa?" Chen entered the office with the confidence of someone who had spent years dealing with military bureaucracy. "Nobody talks to my daughter without me present." Sarah had never been so relieved to see her mother, though she wondered how Dr. Chen had arrived so quickly. Then she noticed the small communicator device clipped to her mother's belt, the same type used by high-level consultants to the Galactic Council. "Mrs. Chen," Agent Mills began, "your daughter has been—" "My daughter has been providing consulting services under proper oversight and authorization," Dr. Chen interrupted smoothly. "I assume you gentlemen have the proper clearance to discuss classified operations with civilian school administrators?" Principal Matthews looked like he was developing a headache. "Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more appropriate." "That won't be necessary," Colonel Weber said, standing up. "Sarah, you're not in trouble, but we need to discuss some security protocols. Your recent recommendations regarding the Andromedan situation have been noted." Sarah felt a chill. If they were questioning her about the Andromedan crisis, it meant the situation had escalated beyond what Admiral Harrison could handle quietly. Her mind raced through the implications. Someone with access to her tactical innovations was using them against Allied forces, and now the military was tracking her communications to see if she was involved. I provided analysis based on publicly available information, Sarah said carefully. If there are concerns about my methods, I'm happy to clarify them through proper channels. Agent Mills closed her tablet. We'll be in touch, Miss Chen. In the meantime, we'd appreciate it if you could be more discreet in your activities. After the adults left, Principal Matthews sat heavily in his chair. Sarah, I don't pretend to understand what just happened, but if you're involved in something over your head, I'm fine, Mr. Matthews, Sarah assured him. It's just a misunderstanding about some academic work I've been doing. She returned to chemistry class 20 minutes before the period ended, acutely aware of every curious glance from her classmates. Emma immediately leaned over to whisper, "What was that about?" "Nothing serious," Sarah lied. "They thought I was someone else." But as she tried to focus on molecular bonds and chemical reactions, Sarah's mind was consumed with a more pressing problem. Someone with access to her classified work was not only using it to attack Allied forces, but doing so in a way that would eventually expose her identity. The careful balance she had maintained for years between her secret role and her normal life was beginning to collapse. During lunch, Tyler surprised everyone by joining their group project discussion without being asked. "I've been thinking about our unconventional leadership topic," he said quietly. "What if the most effective leaders are the ones nobody knows about? Like, what if there are people making important decisions right now, but they have to stay hidden to be effective?" Marcus laughed. "That sounds like conspiracy theory stuff, Tyler." "Maybe," Tyler said, but his eyes met Sarah's across the table. "But think about it. If you were really good at solving problems, but people wouldn't take you seriously because of your age or background, wouldn't you have to work behind the scenes?" Sarah felt exposed under his steady gaze. Tyler had always been quiet, but she was beginning to suspect there was more to his silence than shyness. The way he phrased his question suggested someone who understood the reality of hidden leadership better than most adults. "That's an interesting angle," Emma said thoughtfully. "We could explore how anonymous advisors have influenced major decisions throughout history." "Exactly," Tyler continued. "And how those advisors dealt with the stress of carrying huge responsibilities while maintaining normal lives. The psychological toll of living two different identities." Sarah's sandwich turned to cardboard in her mouth. Either Tyler was incredibly perceptive, or he knew more about her situation than he was letting on. Given the morning's events, she couldn't afford to assume it was coincidence. As the lunch period ended, Tyler lingered behind while Marcus and Emma headed to their next classes. "Sarah," he said quietly, "if you ever need someone to talk to about complicated situations, I'm a good listener." Before she could respond, he had melted back into the crowd of students. Sarah was left wondering if she had just been offered genuine friendship, or if her carefully guarded secret was more transparent than she had ever imagined. Walking to her next class, Sarah realized that the greatest threat to her double life might not come from government agents or alien adversaries. It might come from the growing connection she was forming with people who cared enough to notice when something didn't add up. For the first time since taking command of humanity's space forces, Sarah Chen felt truly vulnerable. The truth about Tyler came out during what should have been a routine Friday afternoon. Sarah was in her bedroom, supposedly doing homework but actually analyzing reports from the Andromedan front lines, when her secure tablet chimed with an emergency alert. The attackers had made a critical mistake. They had left behind wreckage that contained identifiable technology signatures. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the technical analysis. The ships weren't just using her tactical doctrines. They were equipped with experimental human stealth technology that shouldn't exist outside of classified development programs. Someone with very high security clearance was not only leaking her strategies, but also providing cutting-edge military hardware to unauthorized forces. She was drafting a response when her bedroom window slid open. Sarah spun around, expecting to see her mother or perhaps a security breach, but instead found Tyler climbing through with practiced silence. "Don't scream," he said calmly, closing the window behind him. "We need to talk, Admiral Chen." Sarah's hand froze over her tablet. Nobody outside the highest levels of government knew her actual rank. Even her mother only knew she provided strategic consulting. The fact that Tyler had used her correct title meant either he had incredible security clearance or her situation was far worse than she had imagined. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. Tyler pulled a small device from his pocket and activated it. Sarah recognized it immediately, a high-level jamming unit that would block any surveillance or recording equipment. "Your house is being monitored by at least 3 different agencies," he said matter-of-factly. "This gives us maybe 10 minutes to talk privately." Sarah set down her tablet and studied the boy she thought she knew. Tyler had seemed like the quietest member of their group project, content to take notes and offer occasional insights. Now she noticed details she had missed, the way he moved with military precision, the slight calluses on his hands that suggested weapons training, the fact that his supposedly random observations always seemed to push conversations in strategically useful directions. "Who are you?" she asked. "Lieutenant Tyler Morrison, Naval Intelligence," he replied, settling into her desk chair like this was a routine briefing. "I've been monitoring you for the past 6 months, initially to assess security risks. What I found was complicated." "You're 15, Sarah pointed out, though given her own situation, the observation felt hollow. Tyler smiled for the first time since she had known him. "I'm actually 19, but I've always looked young. Useful for undercover work. The question is, why is the youngest admiral in human history attending high school instead of commanding from a proper facility?" Sarah felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders. For years, she had carried the burden of her dual identity alone, with only her mother and a handful of trusted advisors knowing the truth. The relief of speaking openly with someone who understood was almost overwhelming. "Because the moment I take a visible command position, every enemy faction in the galaxy will target me," she explained. "My effectiveness comes from being underestimated and overlooked. The instant I become a public figure, I become a liability instead of an asset." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Smart. But it's also slowly killing you, isn't it? The isolation, the constant deception, the weight of making decisions that affect billions while pretending to worry about algebra tests." Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. She had convinced herself that the personal cost was manageable, that she could compartmentalize her life indefinitely. Hearing someone else acknowledge the psychological toll made it suddenly real. "The Andromedan situation," she said, changing the subject. "How much does Naval Intelligence know?" "We know someone is using your tactical innovations against Allied forces," Tyler replied. "We know they have access to classified human technology. What we don't know is whether you're involved voluntarily or if someone is manipulating your communications." "You think I'm compromised?" Sarah felt a flash of the same anger she had directed at skeptical generals. "During war councils, I think you're a 15-year-old genius carrying the weight of galactic politics while trying to figure out how to talk to classmates," Tyler said gently. "That makes you vulnerable in ways that traditional security protocols can't address." Sarah wanted to argue, but the events of the past week had already proven his point. Her emotional responses to normal teenage interactions were interfering with her strategic thinking. Her worry about maintaining her cover was affecting her decision-making process. And somewhere, someone was exploiting weaknesses she didn't even know she had. "What do you recommend?" she asked, slipping into the professional tone she used during official briefings. Tyler pulled out a second device and connected it to her secure tablet. "First, we upgrade your communication security. Whoever is intercepting your strategies is using them faster than should be possible, which suggests they have real-time access to your transmissions." As he worked, Sarah watched his fingers move across the interface with the expertise of someone far older than his apparent years. "How long have you been in intelligence?" "Since I was 12, Tyler replied without looking up. "My parents were both analysts who died in a transport accident. The Navy decided my aptitude scores were too valuable to waste on foster care." He glanced up at her. "Sound familiar?" Sarah felt a shock of recognition. She had thought she was unique in being thrust into adult responsibilities at such a young age, but apparently the military had a history of recruiting child prodigies when circumstances demanded it. "The difference," Tyler continued, "is that I was always meant to be support staff. You're the one making the actual decisions. That's a much heavier burden." "Do Marcus and Emma know?" Sarah asked, suddenly worried about her other friends. Marcus suspects something but can't quite put it together, Tyler said. Emma thinks you're just shy and have family issues. Neither of them would believe the truth if you told them directly. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. She could negotiate with alien species whose thought processes were completely foreign to human understanding, but she couldn't figure out how to be honest with two teenagers who genuinely liked her. Tyler finished his modifications and handed back her tablet. This should prevent unauthorized access to your communications. But Sarah, you need to know that the situation is escalating beyond what either of us can handle quietly. What do you mean? The attacks on the Andromedan colonies aren't random, Tyler explained. They're targeting specific mining operations that produce rare elements essential for faster-than-light communication. Someone is trying to control galactic information networks. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. If someone could monopolize quantum communication technology, they could effectively control diplomatic and military coordination across multiple star systems. It was a strategy she had considered during the Korthak War but rejected as too dangerous. They're not just using my tactics, she realized. They're implementing contingency plans I never approved for deployment. Tyler nodded grimly. Which means someone has access to your complete strategic archives, not just current communications. The question is whether they stole the information or whether someone with legitimate access is using it without authorization. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Her strategic archives contained theoretical scenarios for dozens of conflicts, including some that could devastate entire civilizations if implemented carelessly. In the wrong hands, her own intellectual work could become the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. We need to accelerate the timeline, she said, falling back into command mode. I'll need direct access to fleet communications and real-time intelligence on the Andromedan sector. Sarah, Tyler said quietly. That means revealing your identity to operational commanders. Once that happens, there's no going back to being a normal teenager. Sarah looked around her bedroom, at the homework scattered across her desk. The photos from school events she had tried to enjoy, the normal life she had attempted to build alongside her impossible responsibilities. I was never really a normal teenager anyway, she said finally. Maybe it's time to stop pretending. Outside her window, Sarah could see Marcus walking home from basketball practice, his backpack slung over one shoulder. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to join him, to worry about nothing more complicated than weekend plans and upcoming tests. Then she turned back to Tyler and began planning humanity's response to its newest existential threat. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened at 3 a.m. Earth time, which meant Sarah was participating from her bedroom while her mother stood guard outside. For the first time in 7 years, she was appearing as herself, rather than through intermediary channels. The holographic projections of 17 different species representatives materialized around her desk, turning her teenage bedroom into the most important war room in human space. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared first, his expression mixing relief and apprehension. Admiral Chen, thank you for agreeing to direct involvement. I know this compromises your operational security. Sarah adjusted her position so the camera couldn't capture her Einstein poster or the pile of unwashed laundry in the corner. The situation has escalated beyond what indirect consultation can address, sir. We need real-time coordination. The Andromedan representative, Ambassador Kethfar, rippled through several color combinations that Sarah recognized as deep concern mixed with gratitude. Young Admiral, the translation software rendered his bioluminescent communication. Our mining colonies remain under siege. The attackers use tactical patterns we cannot counter. Because they're using patterns I developed, Sarah said bluntly. Someone has complete access to my strategic archives, including theoretical scenarios I never intended for deployment. A new voice joined the conference, one that made Sarah's blood run cold. Hello, Sarah. It's been too long since we spoke directly. The hologram that materialized was of General Marcus Kane, former head of Human Strategic Command, and one of the few people who had opposed Sarah's initial appointment to Fleet Command. Kane had argued that no child should wield such power regardless of ability. He had been quietly reassigned to a research position after repeatedly challenging her authority during the Korthak War. General Kane, Sarah said carefully, I thought you were overseeing tactical development at the Martian facility. Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I was. Until I realized that humanity's greatest strategic mind was wasting her talents playing at being a normal teenager, while our species' enemies grew stronger. Admiral Harrison leaned forward. General, you don't have authorization to participate in this briefing. I have authorization from the Colonial Defense Initiative, Kane replied smoothly. A body that was established specifically to protect human interest when the regular military fails to act decisively. Sarah felt Tyler tense beside her. She hadn't told him about Kane's opposition to her leadership, but his intelligence training had clearly picked up on the undercurrents in the conversation. General Kane, Sarah said, her voice taking on the steel that had once made veteran admirals straighten in their chairs. Are you claiming responsibility for the attacks on Andromedan territory? I'm claiming responsibility for protecting humanity's future, Kane replied. For 7 years, you've bent over backward to accommodate alien interests while human colonies scrape by with inadequate resources. The Andromedans sit on mineral wealth that could transform our civilization, but we're too polite to take what we need. The Korthak representative, a massive reptilian form, spoke in guttural tones that the translator rendered as barely controlled anger. This human speaks of theft and conquest. Is this the nature of the alliance we have maintained? Sarah realized she was watching the careful diplomatic framework she had built over 7 years crumble in real time. Kane wasn't just stealing her strategies. He was systematically destroying the trust that made human leadership in the galactic community possible. General Kane has acted without authorization, Sarah said firmly. His actions do not represent official human policy, don't they? Kane's smile widened. I have the backing of 12 colonial governors, 6 admirals, and the entire Colonial Defense Initiative. More importantly, I have public support from humans who are tired of their greatest military leader hiding in high school, while aliens prosper from our protection. Sarah's heart sank. Kane had done more than steal her tactical archives. He had built a political coalition around the narrative that she was failing in her responsibilities. Worse, from a certain perspective, he wasn't entirely wrong. She had prioritized stability over human expansion, diplomacy over resource acquisition. Tyler activated a small device and whispered urgently into Sarah's ear. Naval intelligence reports massive fleet movements in the outer colonies. Kane isn't just talking. He's preparing for major military action. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the growing chaos of alien representatives expressing concern and outrage. Admiral Chen, what are your orders? The question hung in the air like a weapon waiting to be fired. Sarah realized that this moment would define not just the current crisis, but the entire future of human-alien relations. She could support Kane's aggressive stance and maintain human unity at the cost of galactic trust, or she could oppose him and risk civil war within human space. General Kane, she said slowly, you're relieved of all command authority. Any military assets under your control are ordered to stand down immediately. Kane laughed. You think you can still give me orders? You're a 15-year-old girl playing soldier while real adults make the hard decisions. The Colonial Defense Initiative doesn't recognize your authority. Sarah felt something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. For years she had doubted herself, worried that Kane and others like him might be right about her age and inexperience. But as she looked at the fear in the alien representative's eyes and the chaos Kane's actions had unleashed, she realized something fundamental. Age wasn't the issue. Wisdom was. And Kane, for all his experience and credentials, was demonstrating the kind of short-sighted thinking that had nearly destroyed humanity before she took command. Tyler, she said quietly, patch me through to Fleet Command. All channels, maximum priority. Tyler's fingers flew over his equipment. Within seconds, Sarah had direct access to every human military asset in known space. Hundreds of ship commanders, thousands of officers, and millions of personnel could hear her voice. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, she began, her voice carrying the authority that had once united fractured human forces against an implacable enemy. 7 years ago, when the Korthak threatened to exterminate our species, you trusted an 8-year-old girl to find a way to survive. Today, I'm asking you to trust that same judgment. She paused, aware that her next words would either reunify human forces or split them permanently. General Kane and the Colonial Defense Initiative are acting against both human interests and galactic stability. Their actions threaten to undo everything we've built since the war ended. I'm ordering all forces to stand down from aggressive operations and return to defensive positions immediately. Kane's voice cut in through communication channels he still controlled. Don't listen to her. She's chosen alien interests over human survival. The Colonial Defense Initiative offers real leadership for humanity's future. Sarah watched as fleet status indicators began changing on Tyler's screens. Some ships were responding to her orders, others to Kane's. The human military was splitting in real time exactly as she had feared. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus appeared in her doorway, still in his basketball uniform, looking confused and worried. "Sarah, your mom said there was some kind of emergency, and I heard shouting. Are you okay?" Behind him, Sarah could see Emma climbing through the window Tyler had left open, apparently having followed Marcus over from his house next door. Both of her friends stared at the holographic alien surrounding Sarah's desk, their expressions shifting from confusion to amazement. "Sarah," Emma whispered. "What is this?" For a moment, the weight of galactic politics faded as Sarah looked at the two people who had tried hardest to befriend her. They had no idea who she really was, but they had come running when they thought she might be in trouble. "It's complicated," Sarah said, then made a decision that would change everything. "But I could use some help." Tyler started to object, probably citing security protocols, but Sarah cut him off. "Marcus, Emma, I need you to listen very carefully. Everything you're about to hear is classified at the highest levels, but I trust you both more than I trust most of the adults in this conversation." As she began explaining 7 years of hidden history to her stunned classmates, Sarah realized that Kane had been wrong about more than just military strategy. The strength of her leadership hadn't come from age or experience or even tactical brilliance. It had come from her ability to build trust and find allies in unexpected places. And sometimes the most unexpected allies were the people who liked you before they knew you could command starfleets. Marcus sat on Sarah's bed, staring at the holographic projection of a giant reptilian alien as if it might disappear if he blinked hard enough. Emma had taken the revelation slightly better, though she kept touching the Andromedan ambassador's light display to make sure it was real. "So when you said your family moved around a lot for military work," Marcus said slowly, "you meant you were personally commanding fleets in interstellar wars?" "Essentially, yes," Sarah admitted, feeling strangely relieved to speak the truth after years of careful deception. Emma raised her hand like they were still in class. "Question. When you corrected Mr. Patterson about the First Contact War, you said you read about it in advanced texts, but you were actually there, weren't you?" "I planned most of the major engagements," Sarah said quietly. "The textbook version leaves out a lot of the messier details. The Galactic Council had agreed to a temporary recess while Sarah dealt with what Admiral A. Harrison diplomatically called civilian consultation. In reality, Sarah needed time to process the fact that her carefully maintained double life had exploded in the span of an hour, and she wasn't sure how to rebuild it. Tyler had been monitoring communication channels and looked up with grim news. "Kane's forces are mobilizing faster than expected. He's got at least 40 ships moving toward the Andromedan colonies, and more human worlds are declaring support for the Colonial Defense Initiative." "Why?" Emma asked. "I mean, why are people following this Kane guy instead of Sarah?" It was a fair question, and one that struck at the heart of Sarah's deepest insecurities. Tyler answered before she could. "Because General Kane is a decorated adult with 40 years of military experience, and Sarah is a teenager who most people have never heard of. Even though she's been making the decisions that kept humanity alive, she's been doing it from the shadows." Marcus frowned. "But if she's been so successful, why keep it secret?" "Because the moment my age became public knowledge, every enemy faction would target me personally," Sarah explained. "It's easier to assassinate a 15-year-old than to defeat an entire fleet in battle. But now Kane has forced you into the open anyway," Emma observed with the same analytical mind that made her so good at chemistry. "So what's the plan?" Sarah looked around at her unlikely war council, a naval intelligence officer pretending to be a high school student, a basketball player who was still processing the existence of alien life, and a chemistry enthusiast who was treating galactic politics like a particularly complex lab experiment. "I need to prove that Kane's approach will lead to disaster," Sarah said. "Not just to the aliens, but to the human forces that are following him." Tyler pulled up tactical displays on his portable equipment. "Kane's strategy is actually brilliant from a short-term perspective. He's using your innovations to maximum effect. The Andromedans can't counter tactics they've never seen before, but he's implementing them without understanding the broader strategic picture," Sarah finished. Show me the mineral compositions of the colonies he's targeting. As Tyler brought up the data, Sarah felt the familiar clarity that came with complex tactical analysis. Kane was making the same mistake that had doomed human forces early in the Korthak War, focusing on immediate tactical gains without considering long-term strategic consequences. Emma, Sarah said suddenly, you mentioned that some chemical reactions look like they're working perfectly until they reach a critical point, and everything explodes. What do you call that? Runaway reactions, Emma replied. They're stable until a catalyst changes the conditions, then they become catastrophically unstable. Exactly, Sarah said, pieces falling into place. Marcus, in basketball, what happens when a team focuses entirely on offense and ignores defense? They might score a lot of points early, Marcus said, but eventually the other team adapts and starts exploiting the gaps. The offense-heavy team usually collapses in the final quarter. Sarah felt a grim smile cross her face. Kane is triggering a runaway reaction. He's taking short-term tactical gains while creating the conditions for long-term strategic disaster. Tyler caught on first. The mineral deposits he's seizing aren't just valuable to humans. They're essential for maintaining the quantum communication networks that keep 37 different species in diplomatic contact. And if those networks fail, Sarah continued, we don't just lose our alliances. We lose the early warning systems that have prevented 18 different wars over the past 5 years. Emma looked horrified. So Kane's actions could trigger multiple conflicts simultaneously? Worse, Sarah said, accessing her strategic archives. The Korthak remnant has been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. If the galactic communication networks collapse, they'll interpret it as a sign that the alliance is weak enough to challenge. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're saying this Kane guy isn't just stealing alien resources. He's accidentally setting up humanity to fight the same war you won 7 years ago. Except this time our allies won't trust us. That's exactly what I'm saying, Sarah confirmed. And this time the Korthak know our tactics because Kane is demonstrating them publicly. Tyler's equipment chimed with an urgent message. Admiral Harrison is requesting immediate consultation. Long-range sensors have detected Korthak scout ships moving toward the galactic rim. Sarah felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. In her previous crises, she had been able to take time to analyze situations fully before committing to action. Now, with Kane forcing events forward at an accelerated pace, she had to make choices based on incomplete information. I need to address the human fleet directly, she decided. Not just the commanders who already follow my orders, but the ones who are wavering between Kane's faction and official command. How? Tyler asked. Kane controls most of the public communication channels. Emma raised her hand again. What about social media? I know it sounds silly, but if you want to reach regular people quickly, the fleet personnel are mostly young, Marcus added thoughtfully. Lots of them probably use the same platforms we do. Sarah looked at her friends with new appreciation. They might not understand interstellar politics, but they understood their own generation better than any military analyst. Tyler, can you patch me into civilian communication networks? Technically, yes, but it would completely blow your cover. Once you appear publicly as yourself, there's no going back to being a normal teenager. Sarah thought about the life she had tried to build at Jefferson High, the tentative friendships, the normal classes, the simple pleasure of worrying about homework instead of galactic catastrophes. She thought about movie invitations she had turned down, and conversations she had avoided because maintaining her cover seemed more important than genuine connection. Then she thought about Marcus and Emma, who had climbed through her window because they heard shouting and wanted to make sure she was okay. They hadn't known she was an admiral or a strategic genius or humanity's secret weapon. They had just known she was their friend, and that had been enough. Do it, she said firmly. Patch me into every social platform, every communication network, every channel that can reach human space. It's time for Admiral Sarah Chen to introduce herself to the people she's been protecting. Tyler hesitated. Sarah, once you do this, your life will never be private again. Every decision you make will be scrutinized by billions of people. You'll never be able to go back to being just another student. Sarah looked around her bedroom one last time, at the homework she would never finish, the photos from school events that would become artifacts of a life she could no longer live, the normal teenage existence she was about to sacrifice. I was never just another student, she said quietly. I've been an admiral since I was 8 years old. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending otherwise. As Tyler began activating communication channels that would broadcast her image across human space, Sarah realized that the scariest part wasn't revealing her identity to the galaxy. It was wondering whether the person she had become in the shadows was worthy of the trust she was about to ask for in the light. Sarah took a deep breath as Tyler finished routing her signal through every major communication network in human space. In approximately 30 seconds, her face would appear on screens from Earth to the outer colonies, from military vessels to civilian habitats. There would be no going back. You don't have to do this alone, Emma said quietly, moving to stand beside Sarah's chair. Marcus nodded, taking position on her other side. We might not understand all the military stuff, but we understand loyalty. Tyler looked up from his equipment. Signal ready. You'll have simultaneous broadcast to approximately 2.8 billion humans across 47 worlds and 362 ships. No pressure, Sarah almost smiled. She had addressed larger audiences before, but never as herself. Every previous speech had been delivered through intermediaries or from positions where her age wasn't visible. This time, everyone would see exactly who had been making the decisions that shaped their lives. Tyler, include a data feed showing the tactical analysis we just completed. People deserve to see the evidence, not just hear conclusions. The countdown reached 0, and Sarah found herself looking into cameras that connected her to the entirety of human civilization. For a moment, she felt the same vertigo she had experienced the first time she looked down at a planet from orbit. Then training took over, and Admiral Sarah Chen addressed her people. My name is Sarah Chen, she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. For the past 7 years, I have served as strategic commander of human space forces and as your representative to the Galactic Council. Today, I'm speaking to you directly because our civilization faces a crisis that threatens everything we've built since the Korthak War. She paused, watching data feeds show viewership numbers climbing rapidly as the broadcast spread through communication networks. Many of you are seeing me for the first time and wondering how someone my age could hold such responsibility. The answer is simple: necessity. When humanity faced extinction 7 years ago, conventional military thinking had failed. The survival of our species required new approaches, new strategies, and minds that could think beyond traditional limitations. Sarah activated the tactical display Tyler had prepared. General Kane and the Colonial Defense Initiative claim they're protecting human interests by seizing Andromedan territory. But their actions are creating the conditions for catastrophic failure. The data showed projected consequences of Kane's strategy: cascading communication network failures, alliance breakdowns, and the inevitable return of Korthak forces. Sarah watched as real-time analysis confirmed her worst fears. Korthak ships were already moving toward human space, interpreting the chaos Kane had created as an opportunity. The resources General Kane is seizing aren't just valuable, Sarah continued. They're critical components of the early warning systems that have prevented 18 different wars in the past 5 years. His short-term gains are dismantling the infrastructure that keeps our galaxy peaceful. A new voice cut into the broadcast. General Kane had managed to hijack part of the signal, his weathered face appearing alongside Sarah's on split screens across human space. Don't listen to her propaganda, Kane said urgently. Admiral Chen has spent 7 years prioritizing alien comfort over human advancement. While she played diplomat, our colony struggled with resource shortages that these mining operations could solve permanently. Sarah felt anger rising but forced herself to remain calm. General Kane, your strategy is based on incomplete information. Show them the full tactical analysis. I'll show them results, Kane replied. In the past week, my forces have secured mineral wealth worth more than the entire human economy. We've proven that humans don't need to beg for scraps from alien species who profit from our protection. Marcus stepped closer to the camera, his presence reminding Sarah that she wasn't facing this alone. What about the Korthak ships? He asked, his question being broadcast to billions. Kane's expression flickered with uncertainty. What Korthak ships? Tyler integrated real-time sensor data into the broadcast, showing the movement of Korthak forces toward the Galactic Rim. Sarah watched Kane's face as he processed the implications of his own actions. The Korthak remnant has been waiting for exactly this scenario, Sarah explained to her audience. Fractured human leadership, broken alliances, and disrupted communication networks. General Kane's aggressive expansion is being interpreted as a sign that humanity is abandoning diplomatic solutions in favor of conquest. The tactical projections painted a grim picture. If current trends continued, human space would face simultaneous conflicts with the Korthak remnant, several aggrieved alien species, and potentially civil war between Kane's faction and loyal forces. Emma moved into the camera's view, her chemistry knowledge translating complex political dynamics into terms everyone could understand. It's like a runaway reaction, she said. Each aggressive action creates more instability, which justifies more aggression, until the whole system explodes. Sarah saw something change in the data feeds, public opinion metrics, social media sentiment, even fleet communications were shifting as people grasped the full scope of the crisis. Kane's narrative of human strength versus alien appeasement was crumbling as the consequences of his strategy became clear. But Kane wasn't finished. Even if the Korthak return, he said desperately, humanity is stronger now. We have better technology, more ships, and we're not dependent on alien allies who might abandon us. General, Sarah said quietly, the Korthak have been studying our tactics for 7 years. They know everything about human military doctrine, because you've been demonstrating it publicly. The strategies that gave us victory before won't work against an enemy that has learned to counter them. Tyler added new data to the broadcast. Intelligence estimates showing that Korthak forces had tripled since the war's end and had developed countermeasures to human tactical innovations. But we still have advantages. They can't replicate, Sarah continued, her voice taking on the tone that had once rallied fractured human forces. Our ability to build alliances across species barriers, our talent for finding innovative solutions under pressure, our willingness to trust young minds with big problems. She looked directly into the camera, speaking to every human who was watching. 7 years ago, you trusted an 8-year-old to find a way to survive. That trust saved our species. Today, I'm asking for that trust again, not for me personally, but for the principles that have kept us safe. Kane's image on the split screen showed a man watching his political support evaporate in real time. Fleet commanders were switching back to official channels. Colonial governors were distancing themselves from the Colonial Defense Initiative, and public opinion was swinging heavily against aggressive expansion. All human forces are ordered to cease hostile operations immediately, Sarah commanded, her authority now backed by overwhelming popular support. General Kane, you are relieved of command. Report to Admiral Harrison for debriefing. Kane's transmission cut out, but Sarah could see from Tyler's monitoring equipment that most of Kane's fleet was already standing down. The crisis was ending almost as quickly as it had begun, though Sarah knew the consequences would take years to fully resolve. To our alien allies, Sarah continued, addressing the broader galactic community, humanity reaffirms our commitment to diplomatic solutions and cooperative prosperity. The actions of the Colonial Defense Initiative do not represent human values or interests. She paused, realizing that she was no longer just a hidden advisor, but the public face of human leadership in galactic affairs. The weight of that responsibility felt different from her previous burdens, more exposed but somehow less lonely. To my fellow humans, she concluded, the galaxy is vast and full of opportunities that can only be achieved through cooperation and trust. We are stronger when we build bridges than when we build walls. As Tyler ended the broadcast, Sarah slumped back in her chair. The immediate crisis was over, but everything else had changed permanently. She was no longer a secret weapon or a hidden advisor. She was the public leader of humanity's place in a complex galactic civilization. So, Marcus said after a moment of silence, does this mean you're not going to finish our group project? Sarah laughed despite herself, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Actually, I think we just completed the most comprehensive study of unconventional leadership in crisis situations ever recorded. Emma grinned. Think Mrs. Patterson will accept prevented galactic war as our presentation? Tyler was already monitoring the aftermath of the broadcast, tracking fleet movements and political responses across human space. Sarah, the Galactic Council wants to schedule a formal session to address the diplomatic damage from Kane's actions. Tomorrow, Sarah decided. Today I want to remember what it feels like to be 15 years old with friends who like me regardless. of how many Starfleets I've commanded, as the holographic aliens faded from her bedroom and Tyler began packing his intelligence equipment. Sarah realized that the most important thing she had learned wasn't about military strategy or diplomatic negotiation. It was that even the loneliest burdens became bearable when shared with people who truly cared about you. And sometimes, the most unconventional leadership decision was knowing when to stop leading from the shadows and trust others to stand with you in the light.